Okay, so hello everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this talk about the Mid-Amazonia Radical Innovation to Save the Planet. My name is Camilla and I'm the Imperial College Union Ethics and Environment Officer. We've been having a very busy sustainability week with a wide range of events in each of our theme days, tackling topics from climate, air, to nature and biodiversity, which we'll be tackling today. We will begin today with this very exciting talk given by AMA Group. The Amazon rainforest is dying, and along with it, our opportunity to tackle the climate emergency. AMA Group is on a journey, 20 years in the making, that will deliver radical innovation to arrest the destruction of the Amazon rainforest and the communities that call it home. Their story is one of traditional knowledge defining the architecture of Web 3.0 solutions, where digital finance drives sustainable development and where robots work with people to build a metaverse where we are all Amazonians. So with us today, we have Dr. Robin Daniels, the Chief Innovation Officer of AMA Group, Leonardo Barrionevo, the founder of and president of AMA Group, and Mika Rosenthal, AMA Group's Chief Metaverse Officer, unfortunately cannot join us today, but Mika will be presenting the Amazon Metaverse in a video during the talk. For a bit of housekeeping, all cameras have been automatically switched off and all microphones have been automatically muted. During the panel discussion, please send questions via the chat function. Or unmute yourself. Please also tag us on social media using the tags we posted in the chat. This event is being recorded. Now I will hand over to Dr. Daniels for the talk, at the end of which we will be able to take some of your questions.
Great. Thanks very much, Camilla. And thanks everyone for logging in for this talk. It's very exciting for us to be involved in Imperial Sustainability Week. We've been working with Imperial and particularly with the Dyson School for a number of years. So it's great to be have the opportunity to share a little bit of what we're doing and what we're planning with a slightly wider Imperial audience and hopefully even beyond. Camilla's going to drive the slides for me. So Camilla, if we could move into the deck. Thanks. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what Meta-Amazonia is towards the end of the talk. It's a fairly short, probably 20-25 minutes max, so plenty of time for hopefully a bit of discussion afterwards. The company was formed by Leonardo Barrionevo, who was going to be with us today. He's out in the Middle East running our crypto and blockchain business and has been investor meetings today, so unfortunately can't join us. And as Camilla said, Mika is here in spirit, and there's a very short video and demo from him later on. I'm Robin Daniels, and I've been working with AMA Group for 7 or 8 years, particularly around the innovation space and leading on university interaction and developing new intellectual property and looking to apply science and technology that has often been developed for urban applications and applying that to natural environments. And of course, as we all know, we're in the middle of a climate emergency, lots of other global pressures as well. So the impetus to really start having a meaningful impact on some of these big challenges is more acute than ever. Next slide, please, Camille. So AMA Group is a collection of companies that was started back in 2008 with the formation of EBCF, which I'll talk about in a second. These entities combined are a collection of social enterprises, green tech firms and fintechs, all aligned around our core goals and mission, which I'll talk to you about. The EBCF's key driver and key ambition is to acquire land in the Amazon, existing rainforest, virgin rainforest, and transform the way that it's viewed and managed, basically to close the gap between the money that can be made as a short-term one-off through deforestation and mining, which of course we need to slow down and reverse, stop and reverse, the money that's possible to from that, and the revenue it's possible to acquire through the harvesting of non-timber products and other services that we might develop as part of the project. there's a big gap to close there financially. And so we've had to deploy a number of different and fairly innovative commercial models to allow that to happen. And we're not there yet, but we're making good progress. Next slide, please. So our vision is bold. We're aiming to protect 5 million hectares, that's 12 million acres of native forest, about the size of the UK, over the next 30 years. We've started with the first 500,000 acres, and we have 1 million acres in the pipeline that we're in the process of acquiring at the moment. The reduction of about 1 billion tons of CO2 will result, and behind those kind of high-level numbers are many, many very positive impacts in terms of flora and fauna, impact on local communities, and of course, global climate. It is about stopping deforestation in the Amazon, but more fundamentally, it's about correcting the hydrological cycle and the destruction of that, or disturbance of that deforestation is bringing about. Next slide, please. So our global sustainability platform is pretty fundamental. One of the challenges we've faced is that the Amazon is important to all of us. It's very relevant to you, me, everyone on the call, everyone in the planet. And I'm sure everyone on this call will know that, because I'm kind of preaching to the choir. But it can seem like a sort of exotic place far away. So we had to come up with ways to make it more relatable, easier to connect to, and personalize it much more. Next slide, please. And so the global sustainability platform is part of that. And it's so our way of capturing and communicating, first of all, the way we work and align with the UN SDGs, which everyone will be familiar with, but also the four pillars of our business model, which are environmental, promoting the conservation of the rainforest and its biodiversity, the social impact, which I'll talk about in a second, climatic implications, and economic, fostering new ecosystem services, business-related activities, which have a fundamentally positive impact on environment and society. And we're always very careful to think about the risk of unintended consequences of interventions that we might develop. So the global sustainability platform is really about helping people to understand that we are in fact all Amazonians. It's not only the people that live in the rainforest or the people directly affected in that country. Next slide, please. So a little bit about EBCF, which is sort of the mothership, or where this story begins. The Rainforest Conservation Company was established actually around 20 years ago, and it's fully certified by the local and municipal, regional and federal governments to carry out a range of activities, and that in itself is a big hurdle. We as EBCF, as part of AMA Group, is very closely engaged with the local communities, and this is where the bringing together of commerce with the needs of the local communities really starts, because EBCF commits to buying from the local communities the products and services that they produce, primarily non-timber products. So that's nuts, so Brazil nuts, acai, essential oils, those kinds of products, which are harvested by the local communities and by cooperatives. And part of our challenge, or part of our task, is to support them in that, help them to scale in a way that's sustainable, and to capture as much of the value chain as possible. We have been successful in establishing supply contracts with some supermarkets in the UK and the US at a small level, and that will continue. So these are local jobs for local people, and very importantly, it really utilizes the tacit knowledge and experience that the local communities have of their environment, and the opportunity to sustainably harvest from the forest. A proportion of the profits that are generated ultimately then go back into supporting projects on the ground around those 4 pillars that I mentioned. And that can include health programs, women empowerment, education programs, clean water and sanitation. So at one level, fairly basic, but certainly essential to support those communities in these kinds of ways. And they see that very short feedback loop from the work they're doing, the value out of EBCF, and then money back into the community and local projects. Next slide, please. So here's where the reserve is. It's, if you imagine a map of Brazil, it's kind of 3/4 of the way up from the bottom, I guess. It's in the southern area of Amazonas, and on the top map you can see that's all of Amazonas. There, the Manicoré region is in slightly darker green, and the project is red. So 50,000 acres is a big area, but of course the Amazon is almost inconceivably large, and so it's a very small patch. And we can see there kind of visually, if we're going to make a difference, we have to scale this approach significantly across a big geography. The reserve sits along the banks of the Madeira River, you see in the bottom slide there, in a number of different areas. The Madeira is the largest tributary of the Amazon, and the river itself and the many, many waterways that in turn feed into that are also a fundamental part of the reserve, clearly, and from an innovation and research point of view, are really important assets that we'll be studying and learning from as part of the whole innovation agenda. Next slide, please. It's really important, to keep coming back to this, the center of gravity and the entity around which all of this activity orbits is community. These aren't faceless people. These are real people in communities, like you and I, with all the, they have their daily challenges and daily problems as well, and making sure that we not only align everything that we do with the needs of the local communities, and there are 3,000 people in the reserve as it currently stands, but they drive it. That real ownership is genuinely felt and developed by the local communities. We are, as a very quick example of that, there's shortly going to start a training program using a Brazilian filmmaker so that local people can learn how to capture audio and visual materials that we as a group, and EBCF as well, will use for marketing and communication purposes, but will also feed into some of the more technical work. For example, developing an audio landscape of the rainforest, some of the work we've been doing with Imperial and plan for the future. So the local communities are fundamental, and they're very much engaged with all of these steps in the process, not only the harvesting, but all the way through to the most scientific and technical areas of the work. Next slide, please. So here are our key business verticals. So I've mentioned one or two already. Non-timber forest products harvested by the local communities. Carbon credits. Carbon credits get a bit of a mixed press. We know that it's easy for large corporations with deep pockets to try and buy their way out of responsible stewardship of their resources and the way they run their business, if they're so minded. We actually see a change in the market with investors like BlackRock signaling that actually a reliance on fossil fuels and industries that support fossil fuels is not a sustainable investment from their point of view. We see the tide starting to turn. Carbon credits are, however, an important part of the economic model, certainly for the time being. And EBCF is certified to sell carbon credits on the market. And in fact, that would not be possible without all the certifications that are in place from the Brazilian government, the federal government, and state government as well. Ecotourism. We've seen that other countries in the rainforest belts around the world have been very successful with ecotourism. We want to make sure that ecotourism is open to local businesses as well in Brazil, not just large external companies. And we're also very interested in the way that technology can be an enabler for ecotourism so that people can experience the rainforest in a much more realistic way than has been the case before, without necessarily having to go there. We'll come back to that in a second. Digital banking is very important, and buried in there is cryptocurrency and a whole suite of opportunities that we're exploring and moving forward with. Within the group, we have Amabank as a digital bank launching in Brazil. Camilla, I've lost the screen. I don't know if that's just me. That's back. Research, development, and innovation is very important, which I'm going to talk a little bit about now, and the metaverse. Next slide, please. So, in fact, my first conversations with Leonardo, the founder, 7 or 8 years ago, was about technology innovation and research more generally. So the question was, how might we use the reserve as a facility, as quite literally a living lab for researchers, both academics and from business, to engage with the whole range, the huge range, the whole richness of flora and fauna that are present, in a way to develop new intellectual property and new products and services that would ultimately do two things. In the first instance, would help us to understand the rainforest better and predict the impact of things like climate change and so on, but also to develop new intellectual property that we could commercialize and could be deployed in other sensitive and environmentally sensitive environments around the world. We started off thinking about biologists and zoologists and environmental scientists and the kind of research you might automatically think about first. But I'd come from a few years in the world of smart cities, and we started to recognize that there were all sorts of adjacent technologies, digital technologies, that could be very readily applied, at least in principle. And it was around that time that I met Thrish from Imperial, from the Dyson School, at a conference completely by accident. And we started talking about the use of the application of soft robotics, including, as an example, robots that might listen to frog calls to monitor the health of frog populations as an indicator of overall ecosystem health. And it's kind of developed from there. Next slide, please. So we launched Amatech very recently. In fact, it's kind of being launched right now as the Amazonian Center for Technology, Innovation, Metaverse, and Scientific Enterprise. And this is going to be really the focal point for our innovation, using the reserve as the physical base, but making sure we extend through partnerships into a global conversation. Next slide, please. So Amatech is in the reserve, is the reserve. It's a living lab in the heart of the Amazon rainforest. As I said, it's an IP and commercialization engine for the AMA group of companies, but also through partners. And it's the hub for an international network of partners. As I said, we've been working with Imperial for a number of years. We've just finished a great student project, which some of you may be aware of, which Camilla was involved with, which tries to capture some of the metaverse ideas and actually does so in an extremely useful and helpful way. We're also working with the computer lab at Cambridge and 1 or 2 other groups there, and starting to talk with other research groups in different universities around the world. There are close links with Brazilian research institutes, as you might imagine, already, because we really want this to be for people, for researchers to be able to get access to whatever facet of the rainforest is relevant to their research. We're working with Imperial and others at the same time to identify areas of research funding. So we can find financial support for those from a research point of view, but also commercial venture capital and private equity investment funds as well for those projects that make it over the hurdle into the realm of commerciality. There really is no limit to the kinds of the areas of technology that might be relevant here. Our focus is very much on has been up until this point on digital technologies, and there's a list of areas there. Fundamentally, we started off thinking about how we might capture the rainforest and the plants and animals that are living there. And when I say plants and animals, I'm talking everything from the top predators down to microbes. To understand what's there, how they're behaving, what is their health. And apart from helping us understand what's happening and develop much more sophisticated tool for measurement, reporting and verification from an investor point of view, for example, or the monitoring of carbon credit markets or whatever it might be, this is a great stress test for technologies. The rainforest is an incredibly complex environment. And so one of the earlier kind of, or ongoing actually headline goals is to combine, for example, satellite imagery, where you can see obviously as far as the top of the canopy and where there are gaps, combine that with terrestrial data. So the use of soft robotics as an example to sample leaves or soil or whatever it might be, or water, and triangulate that with not only satellite imagery, but other data as well. Environmental DNA analysis is an area we're looking at very closely, to ultimately create a digital twin of the rainforest. Now, and that work is we're doing that now. A digital twin of the reserve. Now we're not going to create a digital twin that includes every leaf and every drop of water, because that would be too expensive and there wouldn't be particular value add in going to that level of detail. However, it is important to get as detailed as necessary across for a number of applications. So we're deploying best-in-class digital twin technologies, which have been developed primarily for urban environments, and a lot of you will be aware of digital twins more generally, and applying that to the rainforest. And the next logical step from that, and a parallel activity, is the development of a metaverse environment. And I'll finish off with a little bit of an explanation about what we're doing with that. Next slide, please, Camilla. So well, it's not quite for the first time in public, but for the first time, this week for the first time in public, surely, for sure, is the MetAmazonia logo. MetAmazonia is our group's metaverse project. And it's a project that is running in parallel and accelerating very quickly, in fact, with the digital twin that we're developing from a more science point of view, if that makes sense. Next slide, please. So MetAmazonia is a digital twin in a different context with more of a fantasy element, because it's a gamified, photorealistic environment, where it will be, of the 50,000 acres of land that make up the reserve at the moment. And the fundamental goal of this is to develop meaningful applications for people to engage virtually, but in a way which will have a real impact on the lives of people living in the rainforest. What's one of the things that's really interesting and a little bit scary from our point of view is that this is such a potent idea that we have been approached by people with outside of Brazil, in Africa and other parts of the world, because actually people understand what a virtual environment is and what the metaverse is. Meta made trendy through Facebook changing its name, of course. But what's unique about this project is that we're talking about a metaverse environment which is about an actual physical place. It will be a photorealistic digital twin of a real place with real people living in it. And those people will also interact and engage with the metaverse, so that anyone, anywhere in the world can engage directly with this part of the Amazon rainforest and the communities can engage back. There are many, a whole raft of potential applications. And one of our challenges is really initially to define, which of the ones we should go for first. Virtual tourism, high on the agenda, as I mentioned earlier. Teaching and learning experiences. So we've started to have conversations with Imperial, for example, and others about the idea of using an online environment like that for seminars and tutorials and teaching and learning, as well as the gamified experience. There'll be a range of P2E or play to earn games within the metaverse, and digital land ownership, which is on the more commercial side of things, will give people buying digital land also an interest in the commercial returns from the activities that are happening, the economic activities happening in the reserve as well. So we're also bringing together the, for example, non-timber forest product, the sale of those products into the virtual world. And this is a very potent combination, which is completely aligned with the core mission of the group and the protection of the rainforest and the communities living there, but at the same time allowing a huge range of creative endeavor to be applied to supporting that mission. Next slide, please, Camilla. And now we've got a very short demo that Mika is our Chief Metaverse Officer, which I think is a cool job title, nothing else. And Mika is leading the development of Meta Amazonia and put together a very short clip just to give you a flavor of what it's about and what it's going to do. And I think Camilla can play that for us now.
Hello, I'm Mika Roosendaal, founder and CEO of Zoan, and today I will be walking you through how we're building this metaverse for the Meta Amazonia. So here, as you can see, I will be opening a browser-based tools where I will be able to just navigate through the environment. So all of this is browser-based, which makes it directly utilizing a virtual machine from a high-quality virtual environment done with the Unreal Engine. And so this virtual machine then renders it directly to a web browser, which allows anyone with the 4G connection or higher to be able to experience this VR experience without any type of powerful gaming PC. And the nice things about the elements, the nature, so it's possible to have like scanned elements, like very high quality assets of trees and even stones and all that. So it can be based on a lidar data. What we're wanting to do with the Meta Amazonia is utilizing the real world data, and all that will be functional. And the interesting part, as it would be scanned like trees in their different times, like when they were like just the little ones to all the way to the big ones. So that would be possible to simulate the environment in the future, even getting those kind of like different data collection points throughout the forest, and that would be making it possible to experience the entire rainforest, not just how it was in the certain period of time, but even in the future as it goes and grows even further on. So this is kind of like the basics, what we're wanting to build, distributing it with the web browser. But same time, it's also, we're wanting to do this gamified world that when you're purchasing NFTs, it would be possible to have certain privileges on the virtual side of things. And same time as there will be the physical location, so that would be possible to experience, for example, with those NFTs, like you would be able to get some real world products such as nuts or oils or other products from the forest that would be helping and empowering the local communities. So this is the main architecture, what we are building for the metaverse, is utilizing this cloud streaming service, and it can be functioning as well. Also, like from those real world data connection points. Thank you so much and I hope you enjoyed the little demo here.
Okay, so thanks, Mika, for that.
Hello, I'm Mika.
Oh, he's back. And that was a world first, guys. No one's seen that clip before. It's very basic, clearly, but there's a lot of momentum around this project, and we've got the best in world partners helping us to develop that whole metaverse approach. So that's all I have. I'm completely open to any questions, comments, feedback.
Thank you for that. So I would like to ask, what are some of the considerations that you need to take when you're working with these local communities and implementing these technologies in their life? So,
I mean, it's a question that's fundamental to what we do, and I suppose there are two aspects to it very broadly. One is to recognise that the levels of, on the one hand, the levels of educational attainment from a kind of developed, westernised technical point of view in relation to the work we're doing, there's quite a gap there, and so we need to be aware of that and to address it from a training and awareness point of view. At the same time, the local community's understanding and knowledge and intelligence around the natural environment and the forest is way in advance of ours, way in advance. And so it's completely, it's not only a two-way street, it's like a two-way motorway of learning and understanding. And making sure that we, as far as we possibly can, embed that tacit knowledge in the solutions that we're developing. And to recognize that we're never going to know as much as the local communities will know or understand that. But at the same time, the work we're doing is going to open up new career and learning opportunities for people living there as well. So that kids growing up in those environments aren't automatically tempted away either to the big cities or to logging companies or mining companies, but have a range of interesting new and different opportunities that weren't necessarily there before. So, but keeping the community at the core and at the heart of all this is key, because if the community isn't there, then we don't have any kind of sustainable solution at all.
And I guess then a quick question to follow that up is, how do you ensure the sustainable development of this community whilst also being obviously financially viable for you as an organization and for them?
So the key thing is to remember that the value chains and the opportunities that they are equipped to or able to participate in are largely the ones that are there already. There may be, out of this, new coders emerging who really get into the metaverse stuff, and increasingly with technology and the fact that the reserve is going to be a sensed environment from a technical point of view and have facilities to allow that. It's quite feasible we're going to have a new generation of software engineers who have come from the Amazon rainforest. And that would be fantastic, because that's a perfect marriage from our point of view in many ways. However, in terms of more general impact and our kind of meta goal of saving the Amazon rainforest, really ensuring that particularly the harvesting of non-timber forest products and the sale of those into international markets can be scaled in a way that maximizes the return directly to the communities without damaging the rainforest in the process. So there's a continuum, right, that starts with very basic harvesting of Brazil nuts, say near local to the community, And at the other end of the spectrum is industrial agriculture, and that's as much of a problem for the rainforest as mining and so on. So we need to maintain the integrity of that fundamental process. There's a really good commercial reason for doing that, and that's because the market wants it. The provenance of products like that in supermarkets, being able to genuinely, demonstrably show that these have been harvested by local communities, directly benefiting them in an environmentally sustainable way, which, by the way, saves the rainforest and the rest of the human race, is a pretty powerful selling point. So it's a question of maintaining the equilibrium in some ways, but raising the pivot generally, so that there's more opportunity without depleting. It's decoupling economic growth from environmental destruction, basically.
Thank you. And of course, you mentioned ecotourism. Is that something that AMA Group is looking more into for the metaverse? Or will that be also something that is going to be in the reserve that you have?
Both. Both. So similarly, there's as with the previous comment, there needs to be a balance. But ecotourism is really important part of the offering, and so there'll be a ecotourism lodge and really fantastic facilities which are entirely in keeping with the environment, and again the local communities will be front and center in the development and management of those. So there are, again, new skills and new job opportunities emerging from that. But that's really ultimately, in terms of numbers and people being able to appreciate the environment, that'll be a tiny proportion if we get the tech side right. You could go now without leaving your sofa to the rainforest. And that's a really important aspect. And as the technology improves, that becomes more and more realistic. If you look at Mika's company, Zoan, if you have a look at that and look at some of the simulations and the lands that they're creating, the photorealism is getting better and better all the time. And so that will become much more of a draw from a tourism point of view.
Thank you. So obviously you've mentioned some of the projects that you have with university, both staff and students. And I wonder, how do you foresee that continuing later on, and how do people get involved?
Okay, so great question. What we want are long-term sustainable partnerships with university partners, and the Imperial model is a perfect demonstration of that in a lot of ways. So already we have, that started with a collaborative research proposal with the Dyson School and involving a number of other universities, and in fact other academic partners in rainforest areas around the globe. But has developed from that into engagement directly with the student community, so student projects. And as you know, we've just been through a round of those already, and that's kind of penultimate year and then final year individual projects as well. And we'd like to develop a pipeline of those. And what's great about that is, of course, one student group moving into individual projects, those teams can inform those that are coming through. And so we're not starting from scratch every time. We can build on previous work. So it's everything from student projects through to working with researchers and postdocs looking for research funding, and then and also where there's commercialization opportunities, pursuing that as well. So, the whole kind of smorgasbord of what a university is and does, from teaching, research, and commercialization and outreach. We need to leverage all of those capabilities.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you for that. I guess one of my last questions would be, what is something that you'd like Imperial staff and students to take away from this talk and the work that you do at AMA Group and at the Reserve?
Well, do you know, I think the main thing is probably hope for the future. It's really easy to get very depressed about the world right now, one way or another. But just this week, we see, news of record temperatures at the North and South Poles, slowing down of different weather patterns, the Gulf Stream, and so on. And it almost seems like a monthly record for deforestation in the Amazon and other parts of the world. But and all of that is absolutely true and should be it should be on front page news every day, not pushed back when other things happen, because it is the significant existential threat that faces us. But it's also easy headlines. And actually, there's a lot of work, not just AMA Group, there are many, there's a huge network of organizations and researchers and other sort of companies working on this challenge one way or another. And it's a really strong network, and there's a lot of momentum, and there's increasing investment around it. So I think my message is that, it's on our watch to do something. The fight is on, and there's an opportunity to engage, and it doesn't matter what your interests are, intellectual interests are, whether it's kind of social anthropology all the way through to hard maths and big data. There's an opportunity to engage with this and help us move the needle on it. So, direct to us or through the faculty or through someone who's been involved in this, then let's try and tackle some of these things together, because it's ours to win.
Thank you. Laura, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you for introducing me to this group. My question is that how are you going to protect these indigenous tribes and environment while they're a victim of contamination from other countries? Some of these indigenous groups, they live out of this big river called Rio Negro in Brazil. And what happened is that all of those rivers in South America yield to that main river and then to the ocean. How groups like yours can help these communities to preserve the water, the natural water from that river? They get fish from the river. They navigate the river to communicate with other tribes, and this river is being polluted by yield from other rivers from South America, from the North South America to the south, and there is no way that people can do anything about it. They're being victimized by the pollution, by sewage going into this river, garbage. And a lot of tribes are disappearing because of that. Yeah. How can a group like yours help with this? This is a major environmental crime happening, and it's not their fault. They live out of this river, they commercialize out of this river, and there's nobody who's talking about it or helping this tribe to survive.
Thanks, Laura. It's a really important point. One thing I'll say before I respond, it's important for me to say that within AMA Group, I'm very much in a minority as a non-Brazilian. So the vast numbers, the vast majority of the team are Brazilian, and 50 or 60 of those are in and around the reserve and are local people. So one of the, and there's a if you look at a kind of a linked point to that, if you look at the narrative around events like COP, there's always a sense that I have, certainly, that it's the Northern Hemisphere developed world telling the Southern Hemisphere undeveloped world what it should be doing, when actually it should be the other way round, and the Southern Hemisphere and the people of the Amazon, as an example, not only telling the developed world, which is it's because of developed countries that we're in the climatic mess we're in, of course, telling them what they need to do in order to support them, but actually saying, look, we're doing these things already. We're innovating and developing and tackling it, and we need your support to do it. And that's precisely the experience we're having at the moment. The solutions and ideas and the fundamental tacit knowledge that's embedded in everything that AMA Group does is, all we're doing is recodifying it and reformatting it in a way that investors recognize or business recognizes, and it's being fed back directly to supporting those projects on the ground. So this is an indigenous community-driven group of companies. That's a really important point. To do it any other way, it will be fundamentally weakened. To your point about the rivers and the fact that these communities are, they're forced to kind of sit around having stuff done to them by things completely outside of their control. Absolutely right. It's one of the big challenges. Actually, water. If I had to pick an element, actually, within all of this, water is the key thing, from the rivers to the whole hydrological cycle. That's a really important thing that we need to correct, because that affects global weather patterns as well as local fishing stocks and pollution of the rivers. We need to think about the balance between things like hydroelectric power as a way to establish energy equity and the environmental impact that damming rivers can have, for example. And these are not simple questions to resolve. These are not easy things. And that's why we need, as many brains as possible applied to these challenges to help us come up with solutions. The message, however, that we're developing and will keep pushing out there is that it makes economic and commercial sense to clean up the rivers and manage them and support the communities that rely on them for their livelihood. And the reality is that's what will encourage governments to use tax as an instrument to support more positive action. It's the lever that will encourage investors to invest in projects that support those things and to steer away things that don't. It's a huge problem. You're absolutely right in South America. If you look at the Congo and the plastic pollution they have in the DRC there, you can't see water for huge stretches of the river for plastic. Big problems which generally don't get reported on. So what can we do? We can do a little bit. We'll do as much as we can. We need lots of other people doing other things to help, and through that give a voice to these communities that is not only heard at COP conferences, but is heard in boardrooms and in the parliaments of the world, so that we can start to shift, we can start to move legislation that has an impact. I'm not comparing this with the Russia-Ukraine situation, but if you look at the speed at which the Western governments have moved as a response to that, imagine that kind of impetus applied to some of these environmental challenges, and we'd be having, I think, quite a different conversation. Sorry, that was a very long, rambling answer. I hope it satisfied you to some extent.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay, in which case, I think that's all the questions from me. So thank you so much, Robin, for introducing us to this incredibly interesting project that the AMA Group is undertaking. It is really interesting to see how research and technologies can provide value to these local communities in the rainforest, and also obviously help maintain the rainforest and combat climate change through it. Yeah, thank you everyone else for tuning in, and have a good day, everyone. Please be sure to check out the last few Sustainability Week events this afternoon and tomorrow, and join our groups.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you all.